So we have a bunch of new subscribers and we're getting a lot of questions about the products that we use. And so we decided today we're gonna do a DIY paint 101. How to use it, some pro tips, and just show you how easy it is to take your thrift store finds, yard sale finds, and used furniture and make them new again. Alright, so when you get your DIY paint, it's going to have clips. This one has already had them removed. I usually use needle-nosed pliers to take them off. And then I usually use like a butter knife or a flathead screwdriver to take the lid off. It's like a normal paint can, like the kind you would get at the paint store. It says on here that you need to stir it thoroughly. I never do because I've never had the paint separate. Ever. Like, that's one of the things about DIY paint. You open the can and it looks just the way it's supposed to. It's not all swirly needing to be mixed.
DIY paint is a minimal to no prep paint, meaning you can just go and paint. But minimal meaning you may want to clean it. We use Dawn dish soap, which cuts grease and works really good to get rid of a lot of your surface stains and issues that you might have on there. And also, if it's really shiny, it's not a bad idea to use some 220 grit and just give it a light buffing. And when I say light buffing, that's enough. You just want to scuff up the surface just a little bit. If it's shiny enough that you can see your reflection in the piece, you may want to give it a buffing.
If you can see your face, you gotta sand it. Otherwise, you're ready to paint. Make sure all the dust is removed off your piece and nothing nasty is on it. That's like the biggest thing that we get, is that if it's gross, that people will have problems with that coming through the clay paint. Also know that if your piece is shiny, like this is pretty shiny, you're going to not get as good a coverage like as if something's dry or raw wood. So this has a leather top. We get asked all the time, can you paint leather? Absolutely. I don't do any prep to this kind of leather. I just clean it and paint it and usually we're good to go. DIY paint is clay based. It also has chalk mineral properties into it. The actual ingredients are listed on the can and they're pretty minimal. It doesn't have any VOCs. It's all natural. You can totally paint inside your house. And it's clay based, which means it's 5 times more pigmented than your standard chalk paint because it takes a lot to pigment that clay, which means you get really good coverage. It's also kind of thick, so if you've only used self-leveling paint, that's going to be new for you. It's an artisan type paint, so that's why you get the highs and the lows and all the good thick clay based in there. One of the things to keep in mind is that you want to paint in the same direction and you want to have long strokes. So usually what I do is I put the paint on there and then I smooth it out. That helps a lot. We're going to do 1 coat. We will let it dry for at least 2 hours and then we will come back and put a 2nd coat. So I get asked a lot, do you need to sand in between coats? If you're worried about having a smoother finish, because this is a little bit textured, you can sand with 220 in between your coats. I personally just wait till I'm all done and then I do 1 good sanding and I get some texture to it and that's the way I like it.
So if you want a perfect finish on your piece and you don't want to see brush strokes at all, we recommend spraying the paint.
It's the path of least resistance. You can try to get no brush strokes when you've brushed, and there's absolutely ways to do that. Neither one of us have the patience for that. So if I want it to look hand painted, I use a brush. So when I'm working on lots of projects, I just put my paint brushes in a Ziploc bag. You can use it for a few projects and then get rid of the bag, or you can wrap them in tin foil, or you can wash your brush in between every use. We like the baggy method. 2nd coat is gonna give me enough coverage that I'm happy. If you're really picky and you're not going to be distressing, then you might need 3 coats, but I like 2 coat coverage is good, covers the streaky parts. Another thing that you might not notice, we don't push hard. If you push super hard, you're going to activate your 1st coat and you're going to pull the paint off, especially if the furniture underneath is really shiny. So tread lightly.
So something that I run into trouble with, I like to run my brush out of paint and then I'll go dip it again. On the 2nd coat, you're best to just keep it well loaded and that way it doesn't drag.
Another thing to keep in mind is that you don't want to overwork the paint, meaning once you put that paint on there, you're not going to brush it 8,000 times to get it perfect because you are activating that first coat. So just put it on there, get a nice long brush stroke. If you have something you don't like, you can always buff it off or sand it later.
So when we first started out, you noticed I just kind of showed you real quick the sanding on the one little spot. We did not sand this whole piece. It was a little bit shiny, but not enough that we were worried about the paint streaking and coming off. We may get a little more distress when we go to distress it because it was shiny and we didn't sand, but we're okay with that. If you're going for a look that doesn't have any distressing on it, you may want to sand the whole piece down before you start painting.
So there's areas that the orbital sander does not get to. I like to hand sand those. This is a 220 orbital sanding paper that I just put over my block. I'm just gonna be hitting all these edges that the orbital missed just to smooth them out. This powder is heavily pigmented, so I'm not gonna brush it off onto my carpet. I don't want it all over the house. When I'm done sanding, I'm gonna take my vacuum and I will come in here and vacuum it off and then take the rest off with a lint-free cloth.
DIY paint is porous, so it does need a sealer if you're gonna be needing to wipe it or if you're gonna be needing to use it for something like putting a cup on it that might have condensation. So we're going to be using DIY clear wax. We love it, it's soft, it goes on really easy, and then it buffs off easy too. If you needed something more durable, DIY Big Top is awesome. We used this on our dining room table over a year ago. We haven't touched it up. It's held up to the 5 kids and crafting and homework, and it's doing great.
I feel like the clay paint is prettiest with wax because it still keeps its matte finish. You get the highs and lows. So that's one of the things I use when I can. If we have to do a lot of furniture, we usually will do a liquid top coat and we'll spray that through our spray gun, and we've got videos on that. We're gonna go ahead and wax this. We also have a complete videos on all the ins and outs on waxing, so we'll drop that link below. Please watch that. If you haven't waxed before, it's got lots of great information.
So if you're using the Big Top, we like to use the foam brush. It helps minimize brush strokes and it goes on real nice and smooth. So just wanted to show you the wax isn't hard. I'm barely dabbing the wax brush in there and it's loaded up really well. And then just apply it. You can run it on straight like this. We like to do circular motions, so we make sure we're getting it all in all the nooks and crannies. And then after this is applied, that's when you let it sit for about a day, and then you can buff and it'll be a nice hard finish.
You might get some highs and lows in the paint. Don't freak out. If you've applied it evenly, those should even out in about 24 hours. However, this is clay paint, so it's gonna react like clay paint. When you buff it, when you sand it, you're going to get highs and lows in the color, meaning you're not going to have one solid straight finish, and that's what's so beautiful about it. So it's definitely a good paint if you want an artisan clay type finish. When you spray this paint, you're going to get less of the highs and lows because it's going to go on flatter without brush strokes. So that's something to keep in mind. If you want this textured finish, brushing is definitely the way to go. As he's putting on the wax, you can see that it's getting a lot darker. It's going to lighten up by tomorrow, but it won't be as light as it was when you originally painted it. It'll be somewhere between when it was wet and when it was dry. After we've done circular motions, we come across and brush just like we do when we're painting and smooth it all out. This will sit overnight and then we'll buff it in the morning. Well, I hope that this helped you guys learn a little bit more about DIY paint. Those of you that have been watching us for a long time, some of you have been asking us, do you have anything where you don't paint Apothecary or White Swan? Zep's gonna drop some links below to some playlists showing blended, drippy, chippy paint finishes, and that will really let you know the full range of what DIY paint can do. I really feel like DIY paint is something that anybody can use. It's user friendly. It's also something you can use around your kids and not worry about them getting hurt because it's all natural, no VOCs. The color that we used today was Apothecary, and we also used DIY clear wax, and we used the Paint Pixie 1 3/4, 1 1/4, and the Paint Pixie wax brush. And you probably didn't see it because Zev didn't record it, but he did buff it with our Buffy block. It smooths it out. If you don't have a buffer brush, just a lint-free rag will work fine.
Stay tuned for all the glamour shots at the end. That's where we take the nice close-ups and the stage pictures so that you can see what it looks like and kind of envision it maybe in your own home.
Be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to Jami Ray Vintage for more
DIY.